Commander Jake Morrison stared at the massive alien ships floating near Jupiter's orbit and felt his heart race inside his chest. The Earth vessel New Horizon had been traveling for 3 months to reach this historic meeting point, and now Jake could see why the scientists back home had been so excited about first contact with an alien species. The ships were huge and sleek, with strange blue lights running along their dark metal hulls, and Jake counted at least 50 of them arranged in perfect battle formation. Captain Lisa Brooks stood next to Jake at the bridge viewport, and her tactical training made her notice things that worried her deeply. The alien ships had their weapons pointed toward Earth's outer colonies, and their positioning suggested they were ready for immediate combat rather than peaceful diplomacy. Lisa had spent 15 years in Earth's Space Navy, and she knew aggressive posturing when she saw it, but Jake had ordered everyone to maintain peaceful intentions, no matter what happened during this first meeting. The communication system crackled to life, and a harsh alien voice filled the bridge with words that the translation computer struggled to convert into English. War Chief Cathver of the Zephyrian Empire announced his presence with a kind of arrogance that made Lisa's hand move instinctively toward her sidearm. The alien leader spoke as if he owned the entire solar system, and his tone suggested that he expected immediate submission from these primitive humans who dared to live in his territory. Dr. Peter Kane stood behind the command console, studying the alien language, patterns and cultural indicators that appeared on his xenobiology screens. Peter had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, and he could see that the Zephyrians were a warrior species who valued strength above all other traits. Their ships displayed battle honors and conquest symbols that told the story of dozens of defeated civilizations, and Peter realized with growing alarm that these aliens had never encountered a species that refused to surrender when faced with superior firepower. Jake activated the communication system and spoke in the calm, diplomatic voice he had practiced for months during the journey to Jupiter. He explained that Earth welcomed peaceful contact with the Zephyrian Empire and hoped that both species could benefit from trade and cultural exchange. Jake offered to share human art and science with the aliens, while learning about their advanced technology and exploring the possibility of mutual cooperation between their civilizations. War Chief Cathvar responded with laughter that sounded like grinding metal through the translation system. The alien commander found it amusing that these hairless apes believed they had anything to offer the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Cathver had conquered 47 star systems during his military career, and every species had eventually begged for mercy when faced with his fleet's overwhelming power. He expected these humans to follow the same pattern and surrender their outer colonies within the next few hours. The alien leader made his demands clear and simple. Earth would immediately surrender control of all space colonies beyond the asteroid belt and provide tribute in the form of raw materials and manufactured goods. Human military forces would be disbanded and replaced with Zephyrian occupation troops who would ensure proper compliance with imperial law. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of human civilization and the enslavement of survivors. Lisa felt her anger rising as she listened to the aliens' arrogant demands, but she followed Jake's orders and kept her weapon systems powered down. Her tactical computers showed that the Zephyrian fleet possessed energy shields and plasma cannons that far exceeded anything in Earth's arsenal. A direct military confrontation would result in the total destruction of human forces within minutes, but Lisa had learned during her military career that superior technology did not always guarantee victory in actual combat. Dr. Peter Kane tried to explain human culture and history to War Chief Cathvar in hopes of finding some common ground between the two species. Peter described humanity's long journey from primitive hunters to spacefaring civilization and emphasized the human values of independence and self-determination. He explained that humans had fought countless wars throughout their history and had developed a deep cultural resistance to foreign occupation and control. Cathver interpreted Peter's historical lesson as proof that humans were nothing more than violent primitives who had not yet learned the benefits of civilized surrender. The alien commander had encountered dozens of warrior species during his conquest campaigns, and all of them had eventually accepted defeat when faced with superior force. These humans appeared to be typical barbarians who would require a demonstration of Zephyrian power before they understood their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Jake realized that diplomatic negotiation was impossible when dealing with a species that viewed conquest as a natural right. The Zephyrians had built their entire civilization around the subjugation of weaker species, and they could not comprehend the idea that humans might choose to fight rather than submit. Jake had hoped to avoid conflict, but he could see that War Chief Cathver would accept nothing less than complete human surrender. The alien commander gave Earth 72 hours to comply with his demands and withdraw all human forces from the outer solar system. Cathver explained that his fleet would begin destroying human colonies one by one if Earth's government refused to accept Zephyrian authority. The war chief had used this tactic successfully against dozens of other species, and he expected the humans to surrender long before the deadline expired. Lisa watched the alien fleet maintain its threatening position near Jupiter and began calculating defensive strategies in her head. Earth's space navy consisted of only 12 major warships and a few dozen smaller patrol vessels that would be hopelessly outmatched against Zephyrian technology. However, Lisa had studied military history extensively, and she knew that technological superiority could be overcome through superior tactics and desperate determination. Dr. Peter Kane continued analyzing Zephyrian cultural patterns and realized that these aliens had a critical weakness hidden beneath their apparent strength. The Zephyrians had become so accustomed to easy victories that they had lost the ability to adapt when faced with unexpected resistance. Their military doctrine relied on intimidation and overwhelming force rather than creative problem-solving. And Peter suspected that humans might possess certain advantages that the aliens had not considered. Jake ordered the New Horizon to return to Earth immediately and prepare a full report for the United Nations Security Council. The commander knew that humanity faced its greatest challenge since the species had first looked up at the stars and dreamed of exploring the galaxy. War Chief Cathver had made a terrible mistake by assuming that humans would surrender without a fight, and Jake suspected that the alien commander would soon learn why. Earth had produced so many successful warriors throughout its violent history. The communication link between the two fleets closed, and both sides began preparing for what seemed like an inevitable conflict. Cathver felt confident that his superior technology would crush human resistance within days, while Jake knew that humanity's survival depended on fighting in ways that the aliens could never anticipate. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and Earth's fate now rested in the hands of every human who refused to surrender their freedom to alien conquerors, who had never encountered a species quite like humanity. President Amanda Foster stood before the emergency session of the United Nations and felt the weight of human civilization resting on her shoulders. The news of the alien ultimatum had spread across Earth within 6 hours, and every major government had already pledged their full support for whatever action the president deemed necessary. Amanda had served in 3 different wars during her military career, and she understood that humanity now faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered before. General Carl Martinez activated the holographic display system and showed the assembled delegates exactly what Earth was facing in the outer solar system. The Zephyrian fleet possessed energy weapons and defensive shields that made their smallest ships more powerful than Earth's largest battleships. Carl had spent 30 years studying military strategy, and he knew that conventional tactics would result in the complete destruction of human forces within the first hour of combat. The president addressed the delegates with the kind of calm determination that had made her famous during the African crisis 10 years earlier. Amanda explained that surrender was not an option because the Zephyrians intended to enslave humanity and strip Earth of its natural resources. She reminded everyone that humans had survived ice ages and world wars and asteroid impacts by fighting together against impossible odds. This alien threat was just another challenge that humanity would overcome through unity and determination. Katie Sullivan received the emergency mobilization order while working on experimental weapon systems at Lunar Research Station. Katie had designed mining equipment and construction tools for 20 years, but now she faced the challenge of converting civilian technology into military hardware within 48 hours. Her team of engineers began stripping every available piece of equipment and redesigning it for combat, use against an enemy whose technology they barely understood. The Luna Station workshops became a frantic hive of activity as Katie's team worked around the clock to create weapons from industrial machinery. They converted plasma welding torches into infantry weapons and modified cargo transport systems into mobile missile launchers. Katie knew that their improvised weapons would be primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, but she also understood that desperate creativity had saved humanity many times throughout its violent history. Director Steve Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of Mars Colony and watched civilian transport ships evacuating women and children to the inner solar system. Steve had managed mining operations on Mars for 15 years, and he possessed detailed knowledge of every piece of heavy equipment on the planet. The massive ore processors and excavation machines had been designed for industrial use, but Steve realized that they could be converted into devastating weapons with proper modifications. Mars mining teams began preparing their equipment for an unexpected purpose as Steve coordinated with military engineers who had arrived from Earth. The giant excavation machines could launch tons of rock and metal at incredible velocities, while the ore refineries could produce explosive compounds from raw materials. Steve understood that Mars Colony would become humanity's first line of defense, and he intended to make the aliens pay a terrible price for every meter of ground they tried to claim. Dr. Rebecca Turner sat in her office at Cambridge University and prepared a broadcast message that would be transmitted to the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Rebecca had spent her career studying human military history, and she wanted the aliens to understand exactly what kind of species they had chosen to threaten. Her message would detail humanity's long history of warfare and survival against impossible odds throughout thousands of years of constant conflict. Rebecca's broadcast began with the story of early humans surviving in hostile environments where larger and stronger predators hunted them constantly. She explained how humans had learned to use tools and fire and cooperative hunting to overcome enemies that should have destroyed them easily. The professor described the rise of human civilization through countless wars and conquests where weaker armies had defeated stronger opponents through superior tactics and desperate determination. The historical broadcast continued with examples from World War II, where human resistance movements had fought against overwhelming odds and eventually contributed to the defeat of seemingly invincible enemies. Rebecca explained how humans had developed nuclear weapons and space travel and computer technology through military research programs that pushed the boundaries of scientific knowledge. She wanted the Zephyrians to understand that warfare had driven human innovation for thousands of years. HFY received Rebecca's broadcast and dismissed it as primitive boasting from a species that did not understand modern warfare. The alien commander had conquered civilizations with much longer military traditions, and he could not believe that these hairless apes possessed any tactical knowledge that would threaten his advanced fleet. HFY ordered his subordinates to ignore human propaganda and prepare for a quick victory that would add another conquered system to the Zephyrian Empire. Meanwhile, every major military installation on Earth began implementing emergency protocols that had been developed during the Cold War but never actually used. Nuclear missile silos opened, and submarine fleets moved to combat positions, while Air Force squadrons prepared for orbital combat missions. The military commanders knew that Earth's weapons were primitive compared to alien technology, but they also understood that humans had always found ways to make inferior equipment work through tactical innovation. Captain Tony Miller stood on the bridge of his cargo hauler and listened to the military briefing that explained his new mission parameters. Tony had spent 20 years transporting supplies between Earth's colonies, and he knew every trade route in the solar system. His cargo ship had been loaded with mining explosives and equipped with emergency escape pods because Tony's mission involved ramming his vessel into enemy ships at maximum velocity. Lieutenant Sarah Davis coordinated with civilian volunteers who had answered the president's call for every available spacecraft to join the defense effort. Sarah's squadron consisted of space tugs and construction vehicles and tourist shuttles that had been hastily equipped with whatever weapons the engineers could provide. Her pilots were mostly civilians who had never fired a shot in anger, but they possessed something more valuable than military training. They were fighting to protect their homes and families. Commander Alex Chon supervised the deployment of modified satellites throughout the solar system as part of a deception plan that General Martinez had personally approved. The satellites had been disguised to look like space debris and communication relays, but they actually contained railgun systems, powered by solar collectors. Alex knew that the aliens would ignore these apparently harmless objects until it was too late to defend against them. Dr. Emma Scott worked with communication specialists to develop psychological warfare techniques that could be used against the Zephyrian fleet. Emma had studied alien psychology, and she suspected that a warrior species might be vulnerable to certain types of audio and visual stimulation. Her team prepared broadcasts of human war cries and death metal music and battle footage that would be transmitted on all frequencies when the fighting began. The 48-hour countdown continued as humanity prepared to fight the most important battle in its history. Every human settlement in the solar system had become a potential fortress, while every piece of civilian equipment had been converted into an improvised weapon. The Zephyrians expected to face a conventional military force, but they would instead encounter 6 billion humans who refused to surrender their freedom to alien conquerors. War Chief Kethver ordered his fleet to advance toward the inner solar system and expected to crush human resistance within the first few hours of combat. The Zephyrian commander had used the same battle formation successfully against 47 different species, and he saw no reason why these primitive humans would present any greater challenge. His ships moved in perfect geometric patterns with energy shields activated and plasma cannons charged for immediate firing. Captain Tony Miller watched the alien fleet approach on his cargo hauler scanner and felt his heart pounding inside his chest. Tony's ship had been loaded with enough mining explosives to level a small mountain, and his mission was to ram the largest Zephyrian vessel at maximum velocity before escaping in his emergency pod. The cargo captain had volunteered for this suicide mission because his daughter lived on Mars colony, and he would do anything to protect her from alien occupation. The first phase of the battle began when Tony's cargo hauler suddenly accelerated toward the Zephyrian flagship at a trajectory that confused the alien tactical computers. Kethver's weapons officers assumed that the human ship was attempting to flee, and they ignored it as a non-threat while focusing on the approaching Earth naval vessels. The war chief had never encountered an enemy that used cargo ships as weapons, and his military training did not include defensive measures against ramming attacks. Tony's cargo hauler struck the Zephyrian flagship's energy shield and detonated with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The explosion overloaded the alien ship's defensive systems, and created a massive hole in their battle formation that other human vessels immediately exploited. Tony escaped in his pod and watched with satisfaction as the alien flagship lost power and began drifting helplessly through space. Lieutenant Sarah Davis led her squadron of converted civilian spacecraft into the gap that Tony's attack had created and began engaging Zephyrian ships with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Sarah's space tugs used industrial grappling arms to tear chunks of armor from enemy hulls, while her construction vehicles fired plasma welding torches at close range. The civilian pilots fought with desperate courage because they knew that defeat meant slavery for their families. The Zephyrian weapons officers struggled to target the human civilian ships because they moved in completely unpredictable patterns. Sarah's pilots used asteroid navigation techniques and emergency maneuvering procedures that had been developed for industrial accidents rather than military combat. The alien targeting computers could not calculate firing solutions against spacecraft that changed direction randomly while approaching at impossible angles. Commander Alex Chon activated the hidden satellite network and began the second phase of humanity's defensive plan. The modified satellites that had been disguised as space debris suddenly powered up their railgun systems and began firing metal slugs at the Zephyrian fleet. The aliens had ignored these objects completely and now found themselves under attack from weapons that appeared to materialize from empty space. The satellite railguns used solar energy to launch chunks of metal at velocities that could penetrate Zephyrian armor plating. Alex had positioned the satellites throughout the solar system over several months, and the aliens discovered too late that humans had turned their entire star system into a massive weapon. The Zephyrian fleet found itself under attack from multiple directions simultaneously, while their sensors showed empty space in every direction. D.A. Emma Scott activated the psychological warfare broadcasts and began flooding Zephyrian communication frequencies with sounds that human warriors had used for thousands of years. The alien fleet suddenly heard Viking battle cries and Apache war whoops and Mongol cavalry charges mixed with modern death metal music and artillery bombardments. Emma's broadcasts created audio chaos that disrupted Zephyrian coordination and filled their communication channels with terrifying noise. The Zephyrian officers had never encountered psychological warfare techniques, and they struggled to maintain discipline while their communication systems transmitted the sounds of human violence. War Chief Kethver tried to order his fleet to change frequencies, but Emma's team had prepared broadcasts for every possible channel. The alien commander realized with growing alarm that humans understood warfare in ways that his military academy had never taught. Katie Sullivan's improvised weapons began arriving from Luna Station as cargo ships delivered modified mining equipment to the human fleet. The Earth naval vessels suddenly found themselves equipped with plasma cutters that could slice through Zephyrian armor and gravity manipulators that could crush enemy ships from the inside. Katie's engineering team had created weapons from industrial tools in less than 48 hours and proved that human creativity could overcome technological disadvantages. The Zephyrian fleet began suffering casualties at a rate that Kethver had never experienced during his long military career. Human ships appeared from asteroid belts and attacked with weapons that the alien sensors could not identify or classify. The war chief's tactical computers showed mining equipment and construction tools registering as military threats, while cargo haulers performed combat maneuvers that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Director Steve Rodriguez coordinated the Mars colony defense and turned the planet's mining operations into humanity's first major fortress. The massive ore processors began launching tons of rock and metal at the approaching Zephyrian scouts, while excavation machines dug defensive positions that could survive orbital bombardment. Steve's miners fought alongside professional soldiers and proved that industrial workers could become effective warriors when defending their homes. The Zephyrian advanced scouts that reached Mars colony found themselves facing weapons that their military manuals did not describe. Massive mining machines threw boulders with the force of artillery shells, while ore refineries produced explosive compounds that detonated without warning. Steve's defenders used their intimate knowledge of Martian terrain to set traps and ambushes. That confused the alien infantry, who had expected to fight conventional military units. War Chief Kethver realized that his fleet was fighting an enemy unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. These humans did not follow the accepted rules of civilized warfare, and they used civilian equipment as military weapons without any regard for tactical doctrine. The alien commander had conquered dozens of warrior species, but none of them had ever converted their entire civilization into a weapons system. The first day of combat ended with the Zephyrian fleet retreating to Jupiter's orbit after suffering losses that Kethver had not anticipated. The war chief's reports to his superiors described an enemy that fought with chaotic creativity and refused to surrender even when facing superior technology. Kethver began to suspect that conquering Earth would require a much larger fleet and completely different tactical approaches. Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated the human defense from his command ship and felt cautiously optimistic about the first day's results. Earth's improvised weapons had proven effective against alien technology, and the civilian volunteers had fought with courage that impressed the professional military officers. Jake knew that the real battle was just beginning, but humanity had shown that they could hurt the supposedly invincible Zephyrian Empire. The alien fleet regrouped and prepared for a second attack while human engineers worked frantically to repair damaged ships and create new weapons from whatever materials they could find. Both sides had learned important lessons during the first engagement, and the next phase of the battle would determine whether humanity could survive against an enemy that possessed overwhelming technological advantages, but had never encountered a species quite like humans. War Chief Kethver stared at the battle damage reports and felt something he had not experienced during his 40 years of military service. The mighty Zephyrian Empire had suffered more casualties in one day of fighting against these primitive humans than during the conquest of the previous 3 star systems combined. Kethver's subordinates looked to him for explanations, but the war chief could not understand how cargo ships and mining equipment had penetrated advanced alien defenses. The Zephyrian fleet retreated to Jupiter's outer moons and began emergency repairs while Kethver tried to develop new tactics against an enemy that refused to fight according to established military doctrine. The alien commander had studied the warfare techniques of dozens of conquered species, but none of them had ever used their entire civilization as a weapon system. These humans converted every piece of civilian equipment into military hardware and fought with desperate creativity that violated every principle of civilized combat. Dr. Helen Parker worked in her emergency laboratory aboard the Earth battleship Defiance and studied fragments of Zephyrian technology that had been recovered from the previous day's battle. Helen had spent 15 years developing advanced materials for space exploration, but now she faced the challenge of reverse engineering alien weapons within hours rather than years. Her team of scientists analyzed energy shield generators and plasma cannon components, while human engineers waited for blueprints they could use. The recovered alien technology revealed design principles that human science had not yet discovered, but Helen's team possessed something that Zephyrian engineers lacked: the ability to improvise solutions using available materials. Helen's scientists could not duplicate the advanced alien alloys, but they found ways to modify human equipment using Zephyrian energy patterns. Within 18 hours, Helen's team had created shield generators that could protect human ships from plasma cannon fire. Colonel Ryan Jackson led the first human counterattack using a combination of captured alien weapons and modified Earth technology. Ryan's squadron included professional military pilots, flying alongside civilian volunteers who had learned space combat during the previous day's desperate fighting. The mixed force approached the Zephyrian fleet using asteroid belts for cover, and prepared to test their new weapons against enemy defenses. Ryan's attack caught the aliens by surprise, because humans were supposed to be retreating and regrouping rather than launching immediate counterstrikes. The Zephyrian tactical doctrine assumed that primitive species would require weeks or months to recover from major battles, but these humans seemed to grow stronger after every engagement. Ryan's pilots used guerrilla warfare techniques that had been developed during Earth's colonial wars and applied them to space combat with devastating effectiveness. Captain Brad Thompson commanded a squadron of modified freight haulers that had been equipped with Helen's improvised shield generators and Katie's converted mining weapons. Brad's ships moved through the asteroid belt like hunters stalking prey and used their knowledge of local terrain to set ambushes for Zephyrian patrol vessels. The alien scouts expected to encounter fleeing refugees, but instead found themselves facing human warships that appeared from behind asteroids without warning. Brad's tactics confused the Zephyrian officers because civilized species were supposed to engage in honorable combat between organized military formations. These humans hid behind rocks and attacked from unexpected angles, while using weapons that the alien databases could not identify or classify. Brad had learned irregular warfare during the South American conflicts, and he understood that inferior forces could defeat superior enemies through superior tactics and intimate knowledge of local conditions. Dr. Maria Lopez intercepted Zephyrian military communications from her intelligence station on Luna Base and discovered information that changed humanity's understanding of their enemy. Maria's translation programs revealed that Kethver's fleet was only an advanced reconnaissance force, and that the main Zephyrian armada consisted of more than 500 warships. However, Maria also learned that Kethver was under enormous pressure from his superiors to complete the conquest quickly and efficiently. The intercepted communications showed that other Zephyrian commanders were questioning Kethver's competence after his fleet suffered unexpected casualties against primitive human forces. Maria realized that the war chief's political position within the alien hierarchy was becoming precarious, and that prolonged resistance might cause internal conflicts within the Zephyrian military command. She immediately transmitted this intelligence to Admiral Morrison and suggested that humanity's best strategy involved making the war as costly and time-consuming as possible. Major Kevin Wright organized civilian resistance groups throughout the outer solar system and prepared every human settlement for guerrilla warfare against alien occupation forces. Kevin had commanded special operations units during the Asian theater crisis, and he understood that regular military forces could not defend every colony simultaneously. His resistance network would ensure that the Zephyrians faced hostile populations, even in areas where they achieved temporary military victories. Kevin's resistance groups included miners and construction workers and freight pilots who possessed detailed knowledge of local conditions and access to industrial equipment that could be converted into weapons. The major distributed weapons caches and communication equipment throughout the asteroid belt while training civilian volunteers in sabotage techniques and insurgency tactics. Kevin knew that every human settlement would become a fortress that the aliens would have to capture and hold against constant guerrilla attacks. The Zephyrian High Command transmitted new orders to War Chief Kethver and demanded an immediate explanation for his fleet's poor performance against primitive human forces. Kethver's superiors had expected the Earth conquest to be completed within 72 hours, but the campaign was now entering its fourth day with mounting alien casualties and no sign of human surrender. The war chief faced the choice between requesting reinforcements that would damage his reputation or continuing the attack with insufficient forces. Kethvar chose to continue the assault because admitting failure would end his military career and possibly result in his execution for incompetence. The alien commander ordered his remaining ships to advance toward Earth's inner colonies and prepare for total warfare against the human species. Kethvar abandoned all pretense of civilized conquest and decided to destroy human civilization completely rather than accept continued resistance from these impossible creatures. Admiral Morrison received intelligence reports showing Zephyrian fleet movements and realized that the aliens were preparing for their final assault on Earth itself. Morrison had hoped to limit the fighting to the outer solar system, but Kethvar's desperation was forcing a climactic battle that would determine the survival of human civilization. The Admiral activated Operation Pandora and began coordinating the largest military effort in human history. Operation Pandora combined every available human resource into a single coordinated strike that would either destroy the Zephyrian fleet or result in humanity's complete extinction. Morrison's plan included regular military units and civilian volunteers and modified industrial equipment and captured alien technology in a desperate gamble that represented everything humans had learned about warfare during their violent evolutionary history. The operation would prove whether human creativity and determination could overcome superior alien technology. Grace Taylor received her promotion to Admiral and took command of the Operation Pandora strike force that included 600 human vessels of every description. Grace's fleet consisted of military warships and armed cargo haulers and weaponized space stations and converted tourist shuttles that had been equipped with whatever weapons the engineers could provide. Her orders were simple: destroy the Zephyrian fleet completely or die in the attempt. The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and both sides understood that the outcome would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or faced slavery under alien rule. War Chief Kethvar commanded superior technology and military training, while Admiral Taylor possessed something more valuable: 6 billion humans who refused to surrender their freedom, regardless of the odds they faced. The greatest test of human courage and creativity was about to begin. Admiral Grace Taylor stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched 600 human vessels prepare for the most important battle in the history of their species. Operation Pandora represented everything that humanity had learned about warfare. During millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of technological development, Grace's fleet included professional military warships, alongside armed tourist shuttles and weaponized amusement park rides from orbital entertainment stations that had been hastily converted for combat use. The human armada moved toward the Zephyrian fleet in a formation that violated every principle of conventional space warfare. Grace's ships traveled in seemingly random patterns that confused alien tactical computers, while their pilots used navigation techniques borrowed from asteroid mining and emergency rescue operations. The Admiral knew that her improvised fleet could not match Zephyrian technology, but she also understood that humans possessed advantages that the aliens had never encountered before. War Chief Kethvar watched the approaching human fleet and felt a growing sense of unease about the upcoming battle. His tactical officers reported that the enemy vessels were using completely unpredictable movement patterns and weapons that their databases could not identify or classify. Kethvar had conquered 47 star systems during his military career, but he had never faced an enemy that converted civilian entertainment equipment into military hardware. Sergeant Mike Foster led the first boarding assault using modified construction equipment and industrial tools that had been converted into combat gear. Mike's team traveled in cargo pods that the Zephyrians ignored as space debris until the human soldiers emerged and began cutting through alien hull plating with plasma welding torches. The sergeant had spent 10 years fighting in urban warfare zones, and he understood that close combat often determined the outcome of battles regardless of technological advantages. The Zephyrian defenders struggled to repel Mike's boarding party because their military training emphasized ship-to-ship combat rather than internal security operations. The alien soldiers wore advanced armor and carried sophisticated weapons, but they had never fought enemies who used power tools and construction equipment as assault gear. Mike's team moved through the enemy ship like industrial workers completing a demolition project rather than soldiers following military doctrine. Dr. Nicole Anderson followed Mike's assault team and provided medical assistance to both human and alien casualties during the boarding operation. Nicole had served as a combat medic during 3 different wars, and she understood that treating enemy wounded could have important psychological effects on opposing forces. Her willingness to help injured Zephyrian soldiers demonstrated that humans possessed both the capacity for extreme violence and unexpected compassion. The sight of a human medic treating wounded aliens with the same care she gave to her own people confused the Zephyrian defenders and disrupted their will to continue fighting. Nicole's actions proved that humans fought to protect their freedom rather than destroy their enemies, and this realization shattered the aliens' understanding of warfare as total conquest. The Zephyrian soldiers began surrendering rather than fighting to the death because they realized that humans would treat prisoners with dignity. Admiral Taylor coordinated the main fleet assault and used every available weapon system against the Zephyrian battle formation. Human warships fired conventional missiles, while converted cargo haulers launched mining explosives, and modified space tugs used industrial grappling equipment to tear enemy ships apart. The coordinated attack created chaos within the alien fleet as their shields and weapons systems struggled to defend against dozens of different threats simultaneously. The Zephyrian fleet began suffering catastrophic damage as human creativity overwhelmed their defensive capabilities. Alien ships designed to withstand plasma cannon fire found themselves destroyed by mining charges, while advanced energy shields failed against industrial cutting tools used at close range. The human fleet attacked like a swarm of angry insects, using whatever weapons they could improvise from available materials. War Chief Kethvar realized with growing horror that his technologically superior fleet was being destroyed by primitive humans who refused to fight according to established military doctrine. The alien commander had spent his entire career studying conventional warfare, but these humans used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Kethvar's ships were designed to fight other warships in organized battles, but they could not defend against enemies who converted their entire civilization into weapons. Sergeant Foster's boarding party reached the bridge of Kethvar's flagship and captured the war chief, using nothing more than modified construction equipment and stubborn human determination. The alien commander found himself defeated by creatures who should have been slaves in his empire, and he finally understood what his species had awakened when they threatened Earth. Kethvar realized that humans did not fight to conquer territory or gain resources, but to protect something more valuable than life itself, their freedom. The captured war chief looked into Mike Foster's eyes and saw something that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. He saw the determination of a species that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and countless wars by refusing to surrender regardless of the odds they faced. Kethvar understood that conquering Earth would require exterminating every human in the galaxy because these creatures would never accept alien rule. Dr. Anderson treated Kethvar's wounds while explaining through a translation device that humans had no desire to destroy the Zephyrian Empire or enslave alien populations. She told the war chief that humanity only wanted to be left alone to develop their civilization in peace, but would fight with unlimited ferocity against anyone who threatened their independence. Nicole's words carried more weight than any military threat because she spoke while saving the life of her enemy. The combination of devastating military defeat and unexpected mercy broke Kethfer's will to continue the war. The war chief realized that his species had made a terrible mistake by underestimating human capabilities and threatening a civilization that possessed both advanced technology and primitive survival instincts. Kethfer ordered his surviving ships to cease fire and transmitted a surrender message to the human fleet. Admiral Taylor accepted the Zephyrian surrender, but demanded that Kethfer send an immediate warning to his superiors about the true nature of human military capabilities. The admiral wanted the Zephyrian Empire to understand that Earth was not a primitive world that could be conquered easily, but a dangerous opponent that would fight with unlimited creativity against any form of alien aggression. Grace knew that humanity's survival depended on establishing a reputation that would deter future attacks. War Chief Kethfer transmitted his final report to the Zephyrian High Command and recommended that Earth be declared a forbidden system that should never be approached by Imperial forces. The alien commander described humans as the most dangerous species he had ever encountered because they possessed both advanced technology and the primitive survival instincts of successful predators. Kethfer warned that attempting to conquer Earth would result in the complete destruction of any attacking fleet. The Zephyrian survivors departed the solar system while other alien civilizations monitored their communications and learned about humanity's unexpected military capabilities. Word spread throughout the galaxy that Earth was protected by creatures who could convert their entire civilization into weapons and fight with chaotic creativity that no military doctrine could counter. The human species had announced their presence to the galaxy in the most definitive way possible. Admiral Morrison established the first interstellar defense treaty with neighboring star systems and began planning for humanity's expansion into the galaxy. The battle against the Zephyrians had proven that Earth possessed both the military capability and the political unity necessary to survive in a dangerous universe. Morrison knew that other alien species would approach humanity with respect rather than contempt after witnessing what happened to the supposedly invincible Zephyrian Empire. The captured Zephyrian technology was studied by human scientists who reverse-engineered alien weapons and shield systems within months rather than the decades that other species required. Dr. Helen Parker led the research teams that combined human creativity with alien science to produce hybrid technologies that surpassed anything either species had developed independently. The humans proved once again that they could adapt and improve upon any technology they encountered. President Foster addressed the United Nations 6 months after the battle and announced that humanity had received diplomatic contact requests from 17 different alien civilizations. The president explained that Earth's reputation as a dangerous opponent had transformed into respect for human military capabilities and technological innovation. Foster declared that humanity would explore the galaxy as equals rather than subjects, and would defend any species that faced the same threats Earth had overcome.